Once I reach 1,000 subscribers, I will always have a live chat on the first Friday of the month at 8 p.m. So please subscribe, click on the bell, and let's get 1,000 subscribers very soon. Good morning and welcome back to Planet Althistory. Today we are going to discuss what if Peru became a great power. Hello audience, Planet Althistory here. Yes, you almost probably now thought that Mr. Z was speaking, right? Well, anyways, coming now back to the scenario. Peru is a country full of untapped potential which could be unlocked and transformed to a good country. Peru has it all. There are all types of climates. There are mountains, there are coasts, there is the Amazon, many resources which you can gain. There is a huge past and a huge history, and it also is a central location among the Spanish-speaking parts of South America. The vice kings of the Spanish colonies, they ruled from Lima, and Lima was a huge city with a big elite. Not only that, but Peru as a whole received also immigrants from all over the place. It was not only the US or Canada or Australia, but also Peru to a certain extent. They got immigrants from Spain, Portugal, even from places like former Yugoslavia, Germany, Austria, Poland, places like China and Japan. And Japan actually had a huge impact on Peru. But due to incompetent leaders, Peru just stayed as that country that it is right now. A country full of unrealized potential. But what if all of that changed? What if Peru unlocked all of its potential and became a great power? The first point of divergence we would need to take is the Pacific War. Peru would declare war a month later to Chile, and the troop movements of Chile would be very different. They would have different naval battles and win, or at least inflict more damage in October 1879. Due to the better outcomes in those naval battles, Peru would not face riots, and the president would not use the money of the state for himself, but actually buy material that is needed to defeat Chile, and thus it would be all reinvested in a huge navy. The elite would also support this and actually see an opportunity to win against Chile, which would give a certain change in mind to the elite. In March 1880, fights on the Chilean-Bolivian border would occur. The Chileans would retreat behind the mountains, and the Chilean government would be under heavy pressure, and the president would be taken away from his position. As the tumult would grow, Peru and Bolivia would try to take advantage of it, but wouldn't push more in the battles. Instead, they would try to maintain the new lines. Argentina got involved in the war too, more or less, and when Peruvian and Bolivian diplomats would also try to convince the Argentinians, at the same time they would go and talk to the Mapuche people, which are more to the south of Chile, and they would actually give them some kind of autonomy if they would be winning the war. Chile would now try to launch a hopeless naval battle and an offensive in mid-1880, but they would be beaten by Peru, who at this point, well, they had more ships. The army grew in numbers and was now better equipped than the one of Chile. At the end of 1880, the war would end and Chile would agree to give up the territory of the Copiapo River. But Peru and Bolivia would face troubles from within because they would not be able to agree on who would actually annex this Copiapio territory. And this would actually lead to the revival of the Peruvian-Bolivian Confederation, and finally, after some months, the peace treaty between Peru, Bolivia and Chile would be signed. Now, you're asking yourself, how would suddenly this Peruvian-Bolivian Confederation come into play? Well, as you know, Latin America as a whole is a very turbulent continent. And as such, I think that it would be very likely that suddenly you would have some coup d'etat in Bolivia, and a pro-confederation faction would somehow gain power in Bolivia, and due to the fact that they won the war against the Chileans, it would somehow just make sense, in my opinion, that something like this might happen. But we are here talking about alternate history. Now, Argentina would be able to claim all of Patagonia and Tierra del Fuego, while Chile would be facing a mess, revolts, rebellions, and also now an autonomous region of the Mapuche people, which could always count on the intervention of the Second Peruvian-Bolivian Confederation. Now, to keep it short, I will continue to call this confederation just Peru, because Lima would be the most dominant city within the confederation. Around the end of the 1880s, Peru would take the islands which nowadays belong to Chile, and also lay claims on the Galapagos Islands, which would anger Ecuador. While Colombia and Brazil would notice that Peru is growing, and they would take measures on their own. Brazil and Colombia, they would then sign some treaties where they would agree on the border, which was in that time really very complicated for them, and thus they would give some path to an improvement of the relations and maybe a potential alliance. The Bering bubble had disastrous effects on the Brazilian, Uruguayan, but also the Argentinian economy. The Argentinian economy was less affected in this timeline due to the larger volume of gold that they would take from Patagonia and the Tierra del Fuego, and as you might know, gold serves always as some type of security during financial and economic crashes. Peru would prosper and even diversify due to the different economy they would have. There would be more mines and less agriculture, plus the Peruvian elite would be ready to invest in factories and technologies, and thus growing their relation with the UK, who at this point was leading the Industrial Revolution. And also in OTL, many British people actually founded companies in Peru, and thus I think this is not far-fetched to mention in one way or another. Peru would treat Acre almost the same as in OTL was done by Bolivia. And everything would go the same way as in OTL, only that this time Ecuador and Chile would join the war against Peru on the side of Brazil. So, to just mention something short, in our timeline Acre was part of Bolivia, and Bolivia got into a war with Brazil, and it was just a mess. So now that there is the Confederation, it's part of Peru, and thus you will have a huge war. Argentina would join Peru's side, seeing an opportunity to finally beat Brazil, while Colombia would have their own internal problems. As you know, Colombia was always facing some type of revolts, rebellions, so they would be not really prepared and well equipped to go to war suddenly. Chile is easily overwhelmed, Ecuador's navy is easily beaten, while the US is not happy to see a war in their backyard, and they would ask Brazil to respect the Treaty of Ayacucho. Brazil would try to invade Peru, but Actually, most of the soldiers on both sides would mostly die due to infections, sicknesses that they would catch in the Amazon. More troops would be free when Chile and Ecuador would be beaten and they would capitulate, and these Peruvian soldiers, they would be sent to the Brazilian-Argentinian front, where they would have actually more a chance to somehow inflict damages to Brazil, while some troops would still lightly defend the Peruvian Amazon, but they would just let the Brazil march closer and closer, because the Amazon would just be too difficult and very harsh for the Brazilians, and thus with less soldiers on the Peruvian side but more on the Brazilian side, the casualties on the Brazilian side would be much higher. While Brazil would march through the Amazon, Peru and Argentina could deal a bigger damage on Brazil, and as I said before, Brazil would then lose more men not only in the Amazon but also in the Argentinian-Brazilian front. And later on the US would also pressure Brazil to just peace out with Peru and Argentina, and thus a status quo ante bellum, which means that no border change would happen between Brazil and Peru-Argentina, while Peru would annex Ecuador, get Chile and an independent Mapuche state as puppet states, and Argentina, they would win important territories and dominate the southern part of Chile economically. Colombia could also come under the control of Peru, where Peru would be asked to bring themselves in Colombia. The US could, if they would see Peru as an ally, also ask them to calm Colombia down a little bit. This would keep the Panama Canal safe, and Peru would show that they would be very powerful on their own, and they would become an important ally to the US. In the meantime, a bigger navy would mean that Peru also becomes an important naval power, not only in Southern America, but also in the Pacific. But since it is pretty much US aligned and not competing with British colonies and Britain, it would just be noted by the world, but nothing more would happen until the end of World War I, where Peru would symbolically declare war on Germany and actually win a few more islands in the Pacific. So instead of an American Samoa, we might have a Peruvian Samoa, for instance. Internally, Peru would, however, not be a democratic country, and they would need some type of nationalistic dictatorship, a dictatorship that would, however, be supported by the elite and the Amerindian population as well. As such, the dictatorship would give power to the elite, at least financially, but still support the notion that Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia and parts of Chile would have a common Incan heritage, and that they were the successor of this empire and would need to fight for a common goal. They would accept the Monroe Doctrine and become some South American counterpart to the US, while Brazil would drive slowly but surely towards the Axis, with the integralists taking power in Brazil. Paraguay in the meantime would be split among Argentina and Peru, where they would still have a war with the Paraguayans, which actually also happened in OTL, where Bolivia had a war with Paraguay. And this would be a very huge reason for the Brazilians to support their own fascist movement. And while World War II would rampage all over the world, South America would also get some action this time. So no more boring Hearts of Iron 4 scenario, no, you will have some action here in South America. Brazil would declare war on Peru and Argentina, but then after World War II they would of course lose some territories to Peru and Argentina. Moreover, Peru would also support the US in the Pacific against the Japanese, and also treat the Japanese minority in a very unfair way. During the Cold War, Peru would be staunchly anti-communist and also claim parts of Antarctica. Around the end of the Cold War, Peru would slowly become more democratic. Reforms would be made because after 100 years or more, this confederation would finally take forms as a full united nation. Lima is a world capital on par with New York, London, Moscow for instance, and Peru could potentially establish some type of alternate Andean union where they would integrate all of their puppet states. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetalthistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Alt History.